October 12th, 2025, 9:47 p.m. Jonas Kemper was sitting in the parking lot of a 24-hour emergency vet in Asheville, North Carolina. His 7-year-old dog, Moose, had just died on the steel exam table inside. Jonas was still holding the collar. His phone buzzed. A CareCredit statement. Amount due, $15,247.19. The original vet bill was $5,200. 23 months ago. How does a $5,000 vet bill turn into $15,000? Without anyone committing fraud, without anyone breaking a single law. According to the CFPB, roughly 1 in 5 customers on deferred interest credit cards end up paying retroactive interest on the entire original balance. 1 in 5. Not because they missed a payment, because of a clause buried in paragraph 7 of the cardholder agreement. This is Jonas's story. It starts in a waiting room. It ends in a parking lot. Jonas was 34 years old. He worked as a freight dispatcher at a trucking terminal off Interstate 40, pulling about $52,000 a year. His wife, Claire, taught 4th grade at a public school in Buncombe County. They had a small house, a 15-year mortgage, and 1 dog, Moose. Jonas had pulled Moose out of a kill shelter in 2017, a 70-pound mixed breed with 1 blue eye and 1 brown. The shelter said he'd been found in a ditch outside Greensboro at 6 weeks old. Jonas drove 3 hours to pick him up. He slept on the kitchen floor with the puppy that first night because Moose wouldn't stop crying. You've probably had a dog like this, right? The one that isn't really a pet. The one that becomes part of how you measure your life. By 2023, Moose was 7. Jonas's father had died the year before. Claire had lost a pregnancy in March. Moose was the thing that got them through it. On November 7th, 2023, at 10:43 p.m., Moose vomited blood on the kitchen floor and collapsed. Jonas carried him to the truck. Claire drove. The nearest emergency vet was 22 minutes away. The vet on duty, a woman in her 50s named Dr. Reyna, ran an ultrasound and came back into the waiting room with a folder. Splenic torsion. The spleen had twisted and cut off its own blood supply. Surgery had to happen within the hour or Moose would die. The estimate was $5,247. Surgery, overnight stay, medications, follow-up imaging. Jonas had $940 in checking. Claire had a credit card with a $2,000 limit and $1,700 already on it. Their combined savings account, the one they'd started after the miscarriage, had $312. That's when Brittany walked in. Brittany was the overnight vet tech. 23, bright scrubs, practiced smile. She sat down across from Jonas and slid a glossy laminated brochure across the table. We work with CareCredit. 18 months, no interest. Most people get approved in 5 minutes. Do you want to try? Jonas filled out the application on an iPad in the waiting room while Moose was being prepped for surgery. 6 questions. Social security number. Income. He checked, yes, I authorize this application. Approval came back in 4 minutes. A $6,000 credit limit. Moose survived the surgery. Jonas drove home at 4:17 a.m. He thought the worst was over. Here's what Jonas didn't know that night. The National Consumer Law Center published a report in 2015 called Deceptive Bargain, the Hidden Time Bomb of Deferred Interest Credit Cards. The report documented exactly what happened in that waiting room. Medical providers aren't trained to explain the terms of the financing they offer. They're trained to enroll you. CareCredit's parent company, Synchrony, pays the provider a small fee for every approved application. A University of Pittsburgh researcher named George Lowenstein published a paper in 1996 called Out of Control: Visceral Influences on Behavior. What he showed, through decades of lab experiments and behavioral research, is that people in acute emotional distress, panic, grief, fear, cannot evaluate financial risk the same way they can when calm. The part of the mind that weighs loss goes quiet. The part that chases immediate relief takes over. Lowenstein called it the hot-cold empathy gap. The pattern shows up wherever money meets fear: emergency rooms, vet clinics, funeral homes. That brochure isn't sitting on the counter when you walk in healthy. It comes out when your dog is bleeding out on a table. Jonas wasn't weak, he was wired. 3 weeks later, on November 28th, Moose developed a post-surgical hernia. Back to the same clinic. Another surgery. $2,137. Brittany ran the charge on the same CareCredit account. Dr. Reyna recommended a lymph node biopsy while they were already in there, just to be safe. The biopsy came back on December 19th. Lymphoma. Chemotherapy for a 70-pound dog runs between $2,000 and $4,000 for a full protocol. Synchrony raised Jonas's CareCredit limit to $10,000 automatically. He signed the authorization by text message. By January 2024, the card had charged a total of $9,775. The chemo meant weekly visits through the spring. Jonas would sit on the floor of the infusion room with Moose's head on his knee, timing the drip. Moose would fall asleep against his leg. Jonas kept telling him, out loud in the empty room, that they were almost through it. Jonas set up autopay, $225 a month, the minimum. And what did Jonas think he was doing? He thought he was paying down a no-interest balance. $225 a month for 18 months is $4,050. He figured he'd carry the rest, refinance later, maybe use his tax refund. He told himself he had time. In April 2024, Jonas tried to move the CareCredit balance onto a 0% balance transfer card from Discover. He'd read about it on Reddit. Denied. His credit score had dropped from 724 to 641. The CareCredit balance had pushed his utilization to 97%. The Discover algorithm didn't care that the debt was medical. Debt is debt. In October 2024, Jonas called CareCredit's customer service line. The rep told him his account was in excellent standing and that he was doing everything right. The rep did not mention that the promotional period was counting down. The rep did not mention what happens when that counter hits 0. He was reading from a script. The script did not require him to explain deferred interest. The Truth in Lending Act, Section 226.16, requires a deferred interest disclosure to appear in the original application. It does not require the card issuer to warn you as the deadline approaches. In 2024, the CFPB opened an inquiry into abolishing deferred interest entirely, calling it, and I'm quoting the docket here, a product category that consistently results in consumer harm disproportionate to consumer benefit. That inquiry is still open. The product is still legal. May 8th, 2025. Jonas opened the CareCredit app before work. The promotional period had ended at midnight the night before. The balance, which had been $4,500 the day before, now read $9,327. A single-line item on the statement explained the difference. Retroactive promotional interest, $4,827 soares. $4,827 of interest. Charged all at once. Calculated back to November 7, 2023, the night Moose had surgery. At 32.99% APR, applied to the entire original balance, not the remaining balance. That's how deferred interest works. You don't get charged interest on what you owe. You get charged interest on what you used to owe. Jonas sat in the truck outside the dispatch terminal for 40 minutes. He couldn't drive. He kept refreshing the app like the number would change if he looked again. Claire was the one who finally said it out loud. "We can't pay this, Jonas." In June 2025, Moose's lymphoma went into remission. For 11 weeks, he was himself again. He climbed on the couch. He ate breakfast. He chased squirrels on the back porch. In early September, he stopped eating. The imaging came back on September 29th. The cancer had returned in his chest, stage 5. No more chemo would extend his life beyond a few weeks of suffering. Jonas and Claire drove Moose to the same emergency clinic on October 12, 2025. Dr. Reyna wasn't working that night. A different vet handled the euthanasia. The bill, emergency exam, sedation, the injection, a paw print in clay, came to $4,029. Jonas charged it to CareCredit. He didn't know what else to do. The statement that buzzed his phone in the parking lot that night showed a balance of $15,247.19. Every dollar of principal he'd paid down during 18 months of autopay had been erased by a single retroactive interest charge applied to the entire original balance. The summer had added late fees and penalty rate interest on top of that. The night Moose died had added $4,029 more. Moose was dead. Jonas owed Synchrony Financial more than 3 months of his take-home pay. There are 3 things Jonas didn't know that night. One of them might be sitting in your wallet right now. 16 CFR 433.2. Almost nobody talks about this one. When a medical provider enrolls you in financing during treatment, when the vet slides a CareCredit brochure across the table in a waiting room, the financing is legally tied to the service. That means if the provider deceived you or failed to explain the terms at a vulnerable moment, you may be able to dispute the underlying charge with the financer, not just the provider. It's called preservation of claims and defenses. It's written into every CareCredit contract because federal law requires it to be. The letter goes certified mail. It won't guarantee a win, but it's the strongest opening move most people have never heard of. Section 1666. You have 60 days from a statement date to formally dispute a charge you believe was billed under deceptive terms. Not a late fee. The underlying charge. If you can document that the terms weren't clearly explained, which in most in-office financing they aren't, you can trigger a formal billing dispute. The issuer has 30 days to acknowledge and 90 days to resolve. Jonas found out about the 60-day window on day 82. CareCredit's parent company, Synchrony Financial, has a specific track record. In 2013, the CFPB fined CareCredit $34 million for the kind of deceptive enrollment that shows up in stories like this one. The order is public at consumerfinance.gov. The Bureau keeps the file. They monitor repeat complaints. And Synchrony, like most large issuers with enforcement history, often resolves CFPB complaints faster than they resolve regular customer service ones. The complaint takes 20 minutes to file. It's free. It won't always fix your balance, but it puts your case in front of a regulator that already has leverage on the company. And here's the piece that took me the longest to understand. A 2015 NCLC report found that medical providers who offer in-office financing are roughly 3 times more likely to upsell additional procedures during the same visit. 3 times. The financing isn't just a way to pay for treatment. It's a tool that changes what treatment you get offered in the first place. When Dr. Reyna recommended the lymph node biopsy during Moose's hernia surgery, since we're already in there, that wasn't a medical judgment in isolation. It was a judgment made in a clinic that had already enrolled Jonas in an open line of credit. The financing lowered the psychological cost of saying yes. That's what it's designed to do. I'll be honest with you. Of all the stories I've covered on this channel, this is the one that made me go through my own wallet the next morning. Because I had a CareCredit card in there too. I'd signed up for it during a root canal in 2022. I'd paid it off, on time, mostly by accident. I'd never known how close I'd come. If you've got a CareCredit card in a drawer somewhere, pull it out tonight. Check the date the promotional period ends. Write it on a sticky note. Put it on your fridge. Have you ever signed a financing agreement under emotional pressure? In a hospital? A vet's office? A dealership? A funeral home? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. The patterns in those comments are why I make these. If this story made you think of someone who's one waiting room away from it, send it to them tonight. The trap works because nobody sees it coming. That's all.